Putting on makeup is super fun. The joy of choosing your look for the day, it's like a ritual of transformation. I love that I can shapeshift. Some days I'm Rapunzel, other days simply Steve. I know other black girls aren't always proclaiming satisfaction, but honestly, it is fun out here in Beast World. Being a black hun, it's defiance, it's arts, more than a performance, it's resistance. However, what does it mean? Like truly. Like how do we define black beauty? What does it mean to be black and beautiful? Does defining it mean we have to reject whiteness? Beauty standards weren't made for black women. They were made to center whiteness. And we've all just tried to squeeze in somewhere. I was beautiful as a younging, but at home. I was beautiful at home. In the household. My beauty was celebrated in the warmth of people who looked like me, but outside, I realized that certain features, certain bodies, lighter skin, loose hair, relaxed long hair, not the finished mango looking type, the right nose. These features were the ones that received the world's approval. And if life has taught me anything, it's this: a human being will never do something that doesn't offer social rewards or any form of reward. So over time, beauty became a quest for women. Beauty in this world has never existed without any form of modification, enhancement, or any form of addition or subtraction, because perception precedes everything. Before you speak, before you're known, you are seen. And in a world that fetishizes girls, especially young black girls, I had to ask myself, what did I learn to protect? Right? How did I guard my femininity in childhood and all throughout my adulthood? In what ways were walls built to protect my feminine identity from men and the world entirely? Over the centuries, women have become deeply insecure, and it's no accident. We're often taught to believe that beauty is our most valuable currency, yet the standards for what counts as beautiful are constantly shifting, often unattainable, and designed to make us feel like we're never enough. So much of who we are and the value we place on ourselves is shaped by the world around us. How we are perceived, acknowledged, and cared for by society deeply influences our self-worth. I use the word care intentionally because true care is not just self-directed. It's a mutual exchange. It extends beyond personal responsibility. The world too must care. Society must give a damn about women. And sorry for the separation. I meant to say black woman in essence. This type of woman actually. A black woman who is simply average. The black woman who simply exists within her own being should be accepted and not alienated, because more often than not, black women have been pushed aside, left uncared for, and unseen. If I were to go on a quest and search for the collective body identified identity of black women, the way our identities are rooted in how our physical bodies are seen, valued, and treated, what would I find? For many Black American or British girls, the dominant beauty standard has always been whiteness. It's often argued that whiteness exists in response to blackness. In order for white womanhood to be seen as delicate, pure, beautiful, and worthy of protection, it had to be defined in contrast to something else. That something else was often the image of the black woman, framed as too loud, too sexual, too strong, too dark, too masculine, or too unrefined. For the African woman, the body identified identity is even more obscured. We're not just invincible, we're placed at the bottom of this beautiful hierarchy. Relegated to the margins, our bodies are rarely celebrated unless altered, lightened, or stripped of their Africanness. One could argue that this is not the case. We have progressed as a society, and reference Lupita Nyong'o and all the other Sudanese models flaunting melanin on the runway. Put a pin on that. We will circle back. We live in a world where big beauty media and an ever growing consumer culture thrive on self doubt. The system isn't built to make us feel whole, it's built to keep us wanting, buying, comparing, and tweaking. It's an economy rooted in self loathing, and when you begin to see truly see that, you can begin to reclaim your sense of self. You start to ask, who am I? When no one is selling me a higher version of myself. That shift in awareness was the turning point in my relationship with my body, my spirit, and entire being. I began to understand that self-love isn't always soft or pretty. Sometimes it's radical, disruptive, and rooted in rejecting everything that told you to hate your reflection. I live in a world where so many decisions were made on my behalf long before I ever took my first breath. Decisions imposed not only by my parents, but by the architects of the world itself. I was born into systems, into definitions, into a structure where beauty had already been defined for me. The world had already decided what is desirable. It had already told me silently but forcefully who I should aspire to be and who I should never become. Being in schools that were predominantly black, you quickly learn, especially in hindsight, that the way we respond to each other as children directly mirrored how society responded to us beyond school walls. Colorism, featureism, and classism reigned supreme. Even in primary school, the concept of beauty and how one perceived themselves was deeply entangled with how the world treated and embraced their existence. I remember tying beauty to light-skinned girls because the boys placed them at the highest value. Girls with looser curls, relaxed long hair, and neatly worn uniforms were met with grace and softness. The right to exist comfortably, to be seen and desired, was something the boys granted, and they granted it sparingly. The girls from West and Central Africa who fully embodied African phenotypes were treated with the harshest cruelty. Dark skin, wide noses, defined jawlines, these features were not only rejected but ridiculed. School became a training ground in how society would continue to receive them with disdain and disapproval unless a miraculous glow up is bestowed upon them. We're in Africa. In my case, South Africa, where whiteness rules as a minority. But because of the not so long distant past, growing up for me set a different standard. Beauty was no longer white as it was for the older generation. It took a new form. And in all honesty, beauty isn't really about looking good. It's about being wanted. So one can argue that it's not in the object, but in the reactional feeling tone of the subject, the one perceiving the beauty. I will not enter the objective and subjective discourse on beauty, but what I think I know is that beauty is about being let in. You have to be invited. The world has done a brilliant job at convincing us that beauty is a personal choice, a preference, but whose preference are we talking about? Individual preferences? Because when you strip it down, beauty works like a system, a machine. It selects who gets love, safety, jobs, freedom, and it does that by copying shaping the social order. So when whiteness became the global default, beauty followed. That's why even as black women, we're not just excluded, we're set up to fail. The closer you are to whiteness, the more beautiful you are allowed to be. That's not just about skin, it's about body shape, how you sound, the texture of your hair, your softness, how well your femininity is packaged simply grants you access. Now, in our communities, we've carved out our own aesthetics. We've said, okay, fat can be beautiful. Even that comes with conditions. The fat must be proportionate. Your ass has to sit. Your hips must curve. Your waist must disappear. So yeah, we've built new shapes, but we're still following old rules. That's why the black woman's journey towards beauty often feels like a trap. Because no matter how much we bleach, contour, or glow up, we're still reaching for a standard that was never designed with us in mind. There's only one Michael Jackson, and Kanye Bao, her transformation didn't take her closer to beauty. It took her further away from it. In fact, it alienated her from beauty. And that's the thing we really say out loud. Beauty is not innocent. It's expensive, it's political, it's violent, it drains, it disciplines, and still it's one of the many forms of girling's oppression. It's subtle, yet it generates female capital, and in our society, womanhood is a commodity. If you're a woman and you're broke, it's on you, babe. Beauty under capitalism is cohesive, it's destructive, it's exclusive, and enough to keep women chasing it forever. Now, desirability politics have entered the chat. So I desired to confront beauty, not by dressing it up, but by tracing the roots of my own insecurities. I'll be vulnerable for a second. I weigh about 50 kgs. I'm a tiny human being. And I wear that on a good month. In the West, that fits a certain standard. But among Africans, I'm probably considered sickly. The insecurities I carried about my weight made me believe I was ugly. Not because I thought so, but because men didn't lust over my physique. Before I even understood what objectification was, a part of me longed to be objectified. I craved the gaze. Sinister. Damn. How cringe. So that brings me into the chat of body types. African men in the majority love bums, and that might have historical roots. In pre-colonial times, a fuller body was often equated with health, fertility, and abundance. But don't get me wrong, fat phobia in Africa is as potent as our need to decolonize our minds. On one end, you're told to eat more, gain something. On the other, fat women are ridiculed and reduced to symbols of unhealthy caricatures. Being slim, I quickly learned that there's a quiet measuring system, a desirability scale used to determine a woman's worth. The body became a tool of judgment, sitting right beside skin tone, facial features, and hair texture. These factors aren't just aesthetic, they define who is considered lovable, desirable, even worthy of basic dignity. We've become superficial with our preferences, often forgetting that preferences are taught. The denial of people's right to exist, to be loved, respected, or cared for simply because they fall outside these manufactured norms is, for lack of better word, hideous. Don't you think? With Christianity and Islam holding dominant positions within the African psyche, we've become aggressively conservative as a collective, and I am concerned. If we were to contest modern day desirability politics by looking into our own history through the lens of apparel, what would our traditional African wear reveal about the black woman's body? What will it tell us about how black women have been objectified in pre-colonial times and within our indigenous settings? And how does that define the overall societal gaze? In contrast to the idea that modesty equates morality, a belief heavily reinforced through colonial Christianity, traditional African women's clothing was often revealing by Western standards. Exposed waist, bare breasts, and figure-hugging fabrics were not uncommon. Yet, within many indigenous communities, this was not inherently sexualized. In many pre-colonial societies, a woman's body was not seen as obscene or shameful. Women's bodies were praised, they were adored, they were honored, not sexualized or objectified. The arrival of colonial ideologies, especially those tied to religion, violently reshaped this relationship. Women's bodies began to be viewed through a lens of hypersexuality, shame, and control. Colonial missionaries described African women as savage, immodest, and animalistic. So this is where we go back to that pin of representation, right? Because I think we're getting something wrong with the representational aspect of black people. Yes, I love the fact that representation is there, but hear me out. Black representation under the guise of inclusion is often nothing more than blackness packaged as art. It's curated, calculated, and glamorized in ways that feels less like liberation and more like containment. The thing about beauty, especially as a social construct, is that it thrives on exclusion. Inclusion, when it does arrive, is never about equity. It's about strategy. And when beauty finally turns to those it has long sidelined, it does so in extremes. For centuries, black women cried out for representation, for the chance to see themselves in films, on billboards, in magazines. But the response, it's almost comical. They gave us the most extreme high fashion version of black womanhood. Yes, representation exists now. Yes, we're happy. I'm glad. I'm glad to see the girl is on TVs, but it is not broad. When I speak of African features and the violence of our exclusion, I'm not referring to women on magazine covers. I'm talking about the women I pass on the street, women in retail stores, women selling fruit and veggies down the road, women in salons, women with fuller bodies, rounder faces, broader noses, darker complexions, caramel skin tones. Where are they in this inclusive vision of blackness? If I don't challenge my own understanding of beauty, how then do I intend to treat people who don't fit into the narrow margins that society calls beautiful? This isn't just a theoretical concern. It shapes how we as women treat one another. And if women can alienate each other in this way, imagine the violence men armed with patriarchy and entitlement. Imagine how disruptive that is. The representation we've been given is a fallacy, a lie wrapped in good intention, because while I am African, I do not look like that. If inclusion were honest, it will not demand blackness to be editorial. It would embrace the full spectrum of what black looks like. Where are the women with coarse afros and undefined curls? Representation, when flattened, is not progress, it is performance. It turns visibility into a costume and asks us to be grateful for the stage because we didn't create it. Okay, so To conclude, right, if I were to sum the why behind this video essay is African women are genuinely considered ugly. We are not respected within the global scheme of things. Within the continent, yes, 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 but that also is isolated. That also is political. And why are we considered ugly? What is it about us that makes us ugly? Why does society agree? When I say society, I'm talking about the global society. Why have they agreed that black women or African women are at the bottom of the beauty hierarchy? So, history will tell us why. For the colonial project to succeed, it didn't rely on guns, greed, and conquest. It required ideologies that could justify the why. These justifications were carefully crafted, rooted in a complex blend of religion, philosophy, and pseudoscience. At the heart of it was the hero complex, the belief that Europeans were divinely chosen, sent by God to save the world from darkness, ignorance, and savagery. Beyond religious doctrine, scientific reasoning was used to validate these missions. Many of these ideas can be traced back to Greek philosopher Aristotle, whose beliefs in hierarchy and natural order laid the groundwork for race-based thinking. He believed that some people were naturally inferior, born to be ruled, a view later adapted to classify African people as less evolved, less rational, and more animalistic. These ideologies didn't just justify colonialism, they shaped how African bodies, minds, and sexualities were perceived and treated. Blackness was framed as excessive, uncivilized, and hypersexual. And though the colonial systems may have fallen politically, their psychological and cultural frameworks still linger. Western imperialism did more than conquer land. It also colonized the bodies and sexualities of black people. As part of this broader project of dehumanization, black people were depicted as overly lustful, lacking control, and closer to animal than human. African women in particular were positioned as the antithesis of European ideals, where European femininity was associated with delicacy and modesty. African femininity was portrayed as vulgar and sexually excessive. These narratives weren't just stereotypes, they were tools of domination. Early travelogues and colonial texts constructed myths about African women's bodies that they felt no pain in childbirth, menstruated excessively, distorting biology to fit an agenda of racial superiority and disgust. These caricatures allowed colonizers to justify exploitation and violence by stripping African women of humanity and complexity. We often talk about beauty, but we rarely stop to ask, where do Africans sit on the spectrum of black beauty? Caucasian beauty is considered universal, so is East Asian beauty to a growing degree, but black beauty, it's fragmented, it's hierarchical. Within the global discourse, blackness is not a monolith and never has been. There's tension between African Americans and continental Africans, between diasporic and native identities. Even within the African continent, there are deep divisions, North versus Sub-Saharan Africa. Each region brings its own histories, features, and cultural expressions, yes, but there is no unified understanding of African beauty, and this disunity, while rooted in real historical complexity, often reproduces the same exclusionary patterns we're trying to undo. Rather than challenging the systems that rank and erase us, we begin to mirror them, valuing some form of blackness over others, replicating hierarchies within ourselves, and the result A representation of blackness that is neither inclusive or honest, but curated, policed, and ultimately colonized from the inside out. I still don't know what it means to be black and beautiful. The definition isn't clear. It really isn't clear. If I have to modify myself in any way, shape, or form to be accepted by society, then that's really telling of who I am. I could do it for fast money. Not everyone can be Caesar, but then at the end of the day, it's like they not honoring me for who I am. I don't have a problem with surgery. I don't have a problem with all of these extremes women go through to ensure that they are beautiful or stay beautiful. It's just, it's the madness of it all. Have you guys seen TikTok? There's a thin line between simply just trying to be better and being insane. And it's starting to look like stupidity. It's sad. It's really sad. You know, that women have to go through these extremes in order to be taken seriously, in order to be rewarded by society. And if you do not attempt to try, nobody will give a damn about you. No one will care about your existence. It's really, it's human beings are interesting, really. I love being human. I love being human, but outside the systems and confines of what we constantly choose on a daily basis to accept as our human experience. But yeah, that's all for. Oh, my mic is on. That's all for today, and I am thankful for this time you've spent with me, especially if you made it all the way to this part of the video. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a lovely human experience after watching this video. If you're going to bed, good night. If you're still going to enjoy your day, have yourself a lovely day. May the work of your hands pass through your day with ease. Stay blessed, stay lovely, stay beautiful. Mwah! Ciao!